I want you to think back to the last time you were really sick. You know the exact physical sensation I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. The absolute worst.
Right. You're huddled under like a mountain of blankets on your couch. Your teeth are literally chattering.
Just freezing.
Yeah, you feel like you are absolutely freezing to death. But if someone comes over and touches your forehead, you are practically radiating heat.
It is a thoroughly miserable paradox. I mean, you subjectively feel like you're standing in a blizzard, right?
Yeah.
Yet objectively, your body is burning up.
Totally miserable. But for this deep dive into our sources today, our whole mission is to decode that exact paradox.
Yeah, we're going to unpack the pathophysiology of pyrexia.
Which is just the fancy medical term for fever. And the main concept we really want to establish right out of the gate is that this awful experience, it is not a malfunction.
No, not at all. It's actually a highly regulated, deliberate, and really ancient biological defense mechanism.
Right, because when we get a viral or bacterial infection, we tend to, conceptualize our bodies as a machine that's breaking down.
Yeah, we assume the heat is just a byproduct of the damage, like friction.
Exactly. But fever is actual proof that the machinery is working perfectly. Let's use a house analogy to frame this because I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, I love a good analogy.
Imagine your body is a house equipped with like a really high-end smart thermostat. A fever is not the furnace suddenly breaking down and blasting heat uncontrollably until the house catches fire.
Right, it's not a broken system.
No, a fever is the homeowner, basically, your brain walking over to that smart thermostat and deliberately reprogramming the target temperature to be higher.
That single word right there, regulated, is the foundational concept for, well, pretty much everything we are going to talk about today.
It's doing it on purpose.
Exactly. The body is actively attempting to reach a new elevated target, and it is going to use every single physiological tool at its disposal to get there.
But before we can get into the chemical triggers that convince the brain to turn up the heat in the first place, we actually need to look at the baseline.
Oh yes, the baseline temperature.
Yeah, we have to shatter this 150-year-old myth about what our body's quote-unquote normal temperature actually is. Because if you ask almost anyone on the street for a normal body temperature, they will all give you the exact same number.
98.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
Or 37 degrees Celsius. I mean, it's treated as absolute medical gospel.
It's literally printed in red on those old analog thermometers. But the origin story of that specific number is wild.
It really is.
I was reading through the historical sources, and that number traces back to a German physician named Karl Reinhold August Wunderlich. This was back in the 1860s.
Working at a hospital in Leipzig, right?
Yeah, Leipzig. And he was undeniably dedicated. I mean, over several years, he amassed roughly 1 million temperature readings from about 25,000 patients.
Which is, I mean, the scale of that data collection in the 19th century is staggering, especially when you consider the instrumentation he was forced to use.
Oh, the equipment description amazed me. He was taking axillary readings, meaning in the armpit, right?
Right.
Using a foot-long thermometer that took 20 full minutes to register a single reading.
Just unbelievable.
A foot-long glass tube in the armpit for a third of an hour?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the rapid triage we're accustomed to today in modern emergency rooms.
Definitely not.
But because Wunderlich's dataset was so massive and so unprecedented, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit just became the undisputed, unquestioned standard for over a century.
Nobody really checked his work, not until 1992 anyway, when modern science finally bothered to rigorously check this massive homework assignment.
Right, physician Philip Makowiak and his colleagues.
Yeah, they published a landmark reanalysis in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and they used modern, highly calibrated electronic oral thermometers on healthy volunteers.
Rather than, archaic glass instruments shoved under an armpit.
Exactly. And their findings completely upended the Wunderlich standard. The true mean temperature they found was actually closer to 98.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Or 36.8 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, so it was lower. But they also proved that, quote-unquote, normal is fundamentally not a static number, is it?
No, not at all. It fluctuates rhythmically based on circadian rhythms. Human body temperature actually dips to its absolute lowest point around 6 a.m.
Just before you wake up.
Right, and then it steadily climbs to peak in the late afternoon or early evening.
So a reading that might be considered like a slight fever at dawn could just be a totally unremarkable baseline temperature at 5 p.m.
Exactly. And the location of the measurement changes the math, too. A core temperature measured rectally runs inherently higher than an oral temperature.
Which in turn runs higher than an armpit or a skin surface temporal reading, right?
Yeah. If you use a forehead scanner on someone who just walked inside from a freezing winter day, you might completely miss a dangerous internal fever.
Wow, yeah, that makes total sense. But the corrections to Wunderlich's data go even deeper than just better thermometers and time of day.
Oh, this is the most fascinating part to me.
The sources highlight a 2020 Stanford study led by epidemiologist Julie Parsonett, and it reveals this massive biological shift.
Yeah, her team looked at Civil War pension records, health databases from the 1970s, and modern clinical data.
Which spans roughly 160 years of human temperature records.
And they discovered that we are literally cooling down as a species.
That is just mind-blowing. The average human body temperature has been steadily declining every decade since the 1860s.
And the drop is statistically significant. It is far too large to be written off as just some mere measurement error from Wunderlich's era.
So what's the prevailing hypothesis for why we are cooling down?
Well, the thought is that modern populations simply experience far less chronic infection and systemic inflammation than our 19th century ancestors did.
Which, makes perfect sense when you think about it. In the 1860s, you didn't have widespread plumbing or water treatment.
No antibiotics either.
Right, or modern dental care. People were just walking around with untreated syphilis, tuberculosis, or chronic periodontal disease all the time.
Their immune systems were constantly in a low-grade state of war. They were constantly fighting off baseline infections.
So their metabolic engines were perpetually running hot.
Exactly. Today, better sanitation and modern medicine mean our immune systems can actually relax a bit.
So our baseline metabolic rate, and therefore our actual body heat, is just lower.
Yeah, it's a brilliant realization.
I do have to push back a little on how we use this clinically, though.
Okay, lay it on me.
If normal is this moving historical target that has dropped over the last century, varies depending on whether it's breakfast or dinner time, and changes completely based on where you put the thermometer.
Yeah.
How can a modern doctor accurately define when a fever actually starts?
It's a great question. It basically forces modern clinical guidelines to abandon the idea of a single universal line in the sand.
So there isn't just one magic number anymore.
No, you cannot simply write down 38 degrees Celsius is a fever and leave it at that. The threshold is a dynamic calculation. You have to specify the parameters.
Like 38 degrees Celsius measured orally in the evening in a healthy adult.
Exactly. And if you are dealing with an immunosuppressed patient or an infant, the parameters shift all over again.
Okay, so the baseline is super dynamic. But the sheer fact that the body maintains such tight, intricate control over this baseline makes the phenomenon of fever even more fascinating to me.
How so?
Well, nature designed a system to deliberately spike our temperature, despite the fact that it makes us feel physically terrible.
Right. It's a huge metabolic cost.
Exactly. So to understand why we do it, the sources take us into the evolutionary history of the heat response.
And the understanding that fever serves a biological purpose is actually really ancient. Hippocrates, back in the 5th century BCE, wrote about this.
Really? What did he think it was?
He described fever as the body's method for quote-unquote cooking and expelling morbid humors from the system.
Honestly, for the 5th century BCE, cooking the bad stuff out is a shockingly accurate metaphor.
Right. Even if the humoral theory itself was completely flawed.
Yeah, a bit off on the humors.
But stripped of the ancient medical baggage, Hippocrates was surprisingly close to our modern understanding.
But the real mechanistic leap occurred much later, right? In the 19th century, with a physician named Karl Liebermeister.
Yes. He was actually a contemporary of Wunderlich, and he made the radical claim that fever was an actively regulated state driven by the nervous system.
Which was huge, because at a time when the medical establishment largely believed a fever just meant your body's cooling system had surrendered to the illness.
Yeah, Liebermeister argued the brain was doing it on purpose.
But the ultimate proof of this regulated behavior didn't come from human trials. I loved this section of the research. It came from desert iguanas.
Ah, yes. Dipsosaurus dorsalis.
The iguanas. Tell me about this experiment, because it's wild.
So in the 1970s, a biologist named Matthew Kluger ran a brilliantly elegant experiment. Now, we have to remember that reptiles are ectothermic.
Meaning cold-blooded.
Right, cold-blooded. They lack the internal metabolic machinery to generate their own body heat. They rely entirely on their external environment.
Okay. So what did Kluger do?
He took these healthy iguanas and injected them with a bacterium called Aeromonas hydrophila.
So he purposefully gave them an infection.
Yes. Then he placed them into a specialized enclosure that featured a temperature gradient. So a cool zone on one end and a very hot zone under heat lamps on the other.
And what happened?
When they're healthy, these iguanas prefer a moderate temperature. But once infected, the iguanas deliberately migrated to the extreme heat zones.
Wow.
They use their behavior to artificially raise their body temperature by several degrees.
So they literally gave themselves a fever by sunbathing.
Precisely. The scientific term for it is behavioral fever.
Hmm.
And Kluger took it a step further, too.
What else did he do?
He found that if he physically prevented the infected iguanas from accessing the heat lamps, or just experimentally kept their enclosures cool,
Yeah.
the iguanas died at much higher rates from the bacterial infection.
That is incredible. The iguanas had an internal drive to turn up the thermostat, but because they lacked an internal furnace, they had to outsource the heat generation to a literal heat lamp.
Exactly. And this proves that fever isn't some recent biological invention exclusive to mammals.
Right. It is an evolutionarily conserved survival mechanism. It predates warm-bloodedness itself by millions of years.
Oh, absolutely. We see behavioral fevers in fish, amphibians, reptiles, and even some insects. They all seek out heat when infected.
Okay, so if the iguana physically crawling onto a hot rock is the evolutionary precursor, what does our internal mammalian machinery look like?
It's a lot more complex, as you might guess.
I want to zoom all the way in under a microscope and trace the actual chemical domino effect here. How does a microscopic bacterial infection successfully hack our brain's smart thermostat?
The cellular play-by-play is essentially a fascinating chemical relay race. It begins with an initial trigger, which we call an exogenous pyrogen.
Let's break that down. Pyro meaning fire, gen meaning generator, and exogenous meaning it comes from outside the body, right?
Spot on. It's an external fire generator. And the classic example mentioned in our sources is LPS, or lipopolysaccharide.
LPS. Okay, what exactly is that?
LPS is this complex molecule that forms the outer shell of gram-negative bacteria. When those bacteria invade the body, your immune sentinels detect it.
Sentinels meaning white blood cells.
Specifically white blood cells called macrophages. They detect that LPS and recognize it as alien structural debris.
Okay, so the macrophages spot the invasion. What do?
They sound the alarm. They do this by releasing their own chemical messengers into the bloodstream. These are endogenous pyrogens.
Endogenous meaning they are the fire generators manufactured from inside the house.
Exactly. And a quick nod to medical history here. The concept of endogenous pyrogens was first proven in 1948 by physician Paul Beeson.
Oh, right. What was his experiment?
He extracted material from the white blood cells of a rabbit and injected it into a healthy rabbit, successfully triggering a fever without any actual bacteria present.
Wow. So it was purely the chemical messenger doing it.
Right. And today we know these endogenous pyrogens are a vast family of signaling proteins called cytokines.
The sources specifically highlight a few of them, like interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and TNF-alpha.
Yep, those are the main ones. These cytokines act like biological flare guns, flooding the bloodstream to warn the rest of the body.
Okay, I'm following the relay race. But how do those flares reach the brain? Because the brain is a fortress, isn't it?
The anatomy here is just incredible. You're right, the brain is usually heavily protected by the blood-brain barrier.
Which acts like a microscopic bouncer, right?
Yeah.
Preventing large molecules circulating in the blood from just washing into the sensitive brain tissue.
Exactly. And cytokines are massive proteins. They absolutely cannot cross that barrier.
So how does the brain know the flares are going off if the bouncer won't let them in?
Through specialized windows in the fortress walls called the circumventricular organs. And the most critical one for generating a fever is called the OVLT.
The organum vasculosum of the lamina terminalis.
Yes, an intimidating name for a very elegant structure.
Very intimidating. What does it do?
Well, what makes the OVLT unique is that it sits right on the edge of the brain, but it lacks those tight junctions of the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, interesting. So it's exposed.
It acts like a guard tower that dips a sensor directly into the passing blood.
Okay. So the cytokines hit the OVLT guard tower. What happens next in the relay?
The OVLT detects the cytokines and initiates a local chemical reaction. It utilizes an enzyme called KEOX2 to synthesize a completely new messenger molecule.
Wait, what's the new molecule called?
Prostaglandin E2, PGE2.
Okay, we have to track this carefully. The bacteria bring the LPS. The immune cell spots the LPS and releases the cytokine flares.
Yep.
The OVLT guard tower spots the flares and uses KEOX2 to manufacture PGE2.
You've got it. And PGE2 is the ultimate key to the thermostat.
Why PGE2 specifically?
Because the OVLT is located right next door to the preoptic area of the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the physical locus of your body's temperature control center.
Okay, so it's right next to the thermostat.
Right. The newly minted PGE2 diffuses into the hypothalamus and binds to specialized receptors called EP3 receptors.
And the physical act of PGE2 binding to those EP3 receptors, that is what actually turns the dial.
Yes. The set point is officially reprogrammed from 37 degrees Celsius to, say, 39 degrees Celsius.
Which entirely explains the paradox of the chills that we started the show with.
It does. Think about it. Your hypothalamus now firmly believes that 39 degrees is your quote-unquote normal temperature.
But your physical blood and tissue are still just sitting at 37 degrees.
Exactly. So the brain essentially panics. It looks at the current temperature and says, we are freezing. We are 2 full degrees below where we need to be to survive.
Wow. So the brain is literally experiencing a subjective state of hypothermia.
Exactly. Which explains why you curl into a ball under 3 duvets, even though your forehead is hot to the touch. Your brain aggressively triggers heat generation and heat conservation mechanisms.
Like shivering.
Right. It initiates intense shivering to generate heat through muscle friction. It also triggers peripheral vasoconstriction.
Meaning it clamps down the blood vessels in your skin.
Yes, to shunt warm blood toward your vital organs, which is why your skin looks pale and feels cold to the touch.
And the sources also detail something called non-shivering thermogenesis in brown fat using a specific protein called UCP1.
Uncoupling protein 1. This is a brilliant cellular trick. Normally, mitochondria burn fuel to create ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell.
Right, that's basic biology. So what does UCP1 do?
UCP1 short-circuits that entire process. It uncouples the burning from the energy capture.
So it's not making ATP anymore?
No. The brown fat cells just burn fuel and release the resulting energy as pure, unadulterated heat.
Oh, wow. So your body just throws every log on the fire until you finally reach that new 39-degree target.
And once you hit it, the chills vanish. You stop shivering, and you just feel hot and lethargic while your immune system fights the war.
But then, when the immune system finally wins, the macrophages stop releasing cytokines.
Correct. The OVLT stops making PGE2.
The EP3 receptors empty out, and the hypothalamus just snaps the thermostat back down to 37 degrees.
Which instantly creates the exact opposite physiological crisis.
Right, because now your body is physically sitting at 39 degrees, but the brain's target is back to 37.
So the brain triggers massive heat loss mechanisms to avoid overheating. You experience extreme vasodilation.
Meaning the blood vessels in your skin open wide, causing you to flush red.
Yep. You start sweating profusely to dump the heat through evaporation. In clinical terms, if this cool down happens gradually, it's called lysis.
And if it happens abruptly?
If it happens abruptly with drenching night sweats, it's called crisis.
Lysis and crisis. Seeing the mechanical chain reaction makes it so clear. But if PGE2 is the specific lock and key for the thermostat, that perfectly explains how modern fever-reducing drugs work, doesn't it?
It does. Because drugs like ibuprofen, aspirin, and acetaminophen, they don't act like chemical ice packs, do they? They don't just freeze your blood.
No, they don't cool the body directly at all. They're classified as COX inhibitors. Remember the enzyme COX2 in the OVLT guard tower that manufactures the PGE2?
Right, so ibuprofen physically blocks that specific enzyme.
Exactly. By blocking COX2, you halt the production of PGE2. Without PGE2 binding to the hypothalamus, the set point immediately drops back down to normal.
And the brain realizes the body is too hot, and it kicks on the sweating and vasodilation to cool you down naturally.
You got it.
Which brings up a massive philosophical and medical debate from the sources.
That's a big one, yes.
If fever is this highly evolved, cellularly complex defense mechanism that relies on millions of years of evolution to function, why do we try so incredibly hard to suppress it?
It's a great point. To answer that, we first have to draw a hard physiological line between fever pyrexia and hyperthermia.
Okay, pyrexia versus hyperthermia. How do they differ? They look similar on a thermometer, don't they? They do, but they are completely different states. As we've established, pyrexia is a regulated rise. The set point goes up.
And hyperthermia.
Hyperthermia, like exertional heat stroke from running a marathon in the summer, or malignant hyperthermia from an adverse reaction to anesthesia, is an entirely unregulated rise.
So in hyperthermia, the brain's thermostat is still set to a normal 37 degrees, but the body is either generating way too much heat or completely failing to cool itself down.
Right, the furnace is actually broken, or the house is literally on fire.
Got it.
and this distinction completely dictates treatment. If a patient is suffering from heat stroke hyperthermia, giving them ibuprofen is completely useless.
Because the set point is already normal. There is no excessive COX enzyme activity to block.
Exactly. You have to physically cool them down with ice baths or specific antidotes.
But with a true regulated fever, the body is firmly in the driver's seat. Which brings us to the concept of fever phobia, doesn't it?
Yes, a term coined in a 1980 paper by pediatrician Barton Schmidt.
The sources detail how parents, and frankly many adults treating themselves, wildly overestimate the inherent danger of a fever.
The persistent anxiety is that a fever, if left untreated, will just keep rising indefinitely until it boils the brain and causes permanent neurological damage.
But because a fever is regulated, the hypothalamus essentially places a hard cap on it, right?
Right. Regulated fevers from standard infections rarely exceed 41 degrees Celsius, or about 105.8 Fahrenheit. The body will not cook itself.
That is so reassuring. And the sources bust a few other persistent myths that tie into this phobia, like a higher fever does not automatically correlate with a more serious or deadly illness.
In many cases, the exact opposite is true. If you look at patients with severe systemic sepsis, especially the elderly or premature infants, they can actually become hypothermic.
Their core temperature drops.
Yes, and that is often a much worse prognostic sign than a high fever because it indicates the immune system is utterly overwhelmed and failing to mount that complex metabolic defense.
We also have to mention the teething myth because every parent has heard it. The idea that a baby cutting a new tooth will run a high fever.
Yeah, the clinical data just does not support that at all.
Really, none of it.
Rigorous studies show that teething can cause mild irritability, extra saliva, and perhaps a tiny fraction of a degree temperature fluctuation. But it does not produce a true pyrexia above 38 degrees Celsius.
So if a teething infant has a true fever,
There is a concurrent viral or bacterial infection happening. It is not just the tooth.
okay, well, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If fever is so medically beneficial, if it caps itself to prevent brain damage, and if iguanas literally die without it, shouldn't we just throw away our medicine cabinets?
Well,
I mean, the sources mentioned Julius Wagner-Jauregg, who took this logic to the extreme.
yes. The malariotherapy story. It is one of the darkest and most fascinating chapters in medical history.
This Austrian psychiatrist literally won the 1927 Nobel Prize in Medicine for deliberately infecting his neurosyphilis patients with malaria.
He injected them with malaria-infected blood so that the resulting extreme cyclic fevers would burn out the syphilis bacteria in their brains.
Which is insane. So if we literally handed out Nobel Prizes for weaponizing fever, why on earth do we suppress it today?
It is a brilliant question, and it actually remains the center of an ongoing medical debate. The short answer is that the biological benefits of fever are highly context-dependent.
Okay, unpack that.
Elevated temperatures do impair the replication of certain pathogens, and they definitely enhance the efficiency of your white blood cells.
Yeah.
But that defense comes with a massive metabolic tax.
What kind of tax are we talking about?
For every 1 degree Celsius your body temperature rises, your basal metabolic rate increases by roughly 10 to 12%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That means your heart has to pump faster, your lungs have to work harder, and your oxygen demand skyrockets.
So in the ICU, if you have a patient with traumatic brain injury or severe heart failure, that metabolic tax could be lethal.
Exactly. In critically ill patients, the cardiovascular strain of the fever can be far more dangerous than the underlying infection. The heart might simply give out under the increased demand.
That makes total sense. So in those specific fragile settings, aggressively treating and suppressing a fever is absolutely vital to save the patient's life.
But what about for an otherwise healthy adult lying on the couch with the seasonal flu?
Yeah. Their heart can easily handle a 10% metabolic increase.
Right. For an otherwise healthy person with a routine viral infection, treating a fever is almost entirely about comfort, not medical necessity. Taking a COX inhibitor isn't going to drastically prolong your cold, but it will relieve the muscle aches and let you sleep, which is also a critical component of healing.
So the paradigm shift is understanding that you are treating your own discomfort. You are not, quote unquote, saving yourself from the fever.
That's it, exactly. It completely recontextualizes the experience.
Fever isn't the enemy invading your house. It is the alarm system, the barricade, and the first responder all rolled into one physiological response.
It is arguably one of the cheapest, most universal, and most informative diagnostic signals in all of medicine. I mean, it shapes how pediatricians counsel anxious parents. It dictates aggressive ICU sepsis protocols.
And it served as a primary global screening tool for tracking the spread of recent pandemics.
Exactly. Even with all the historical caveats we discussed about armpit thermometers versus temporal scanners and morning dips versus evening peaks.
It all comes back to recognizing the incredible ancient cellular communication happening right under the surface.
Your immune sentinels are spotting the invader, the OVLT guard tower is sampling your blood, and your evolutionary thermostat is doing exactly what it has done for millions of years to ensure your survival.
So the next time you find yourself shivering under a pile of blankets, radiating heat but subjectively feeling freezing cold, take a second to respect the sheer complexity of the machinery keeping you alive. But
And always a but.
there is. I want to leave you with one final mind-bending thought to mull over based on our sources today. We talked about Julie Parsonet's Stanford study.
How the average human body temperature has steadily dropped over the last 150 years.
Right. Because of clean water, modern medicine, and fewer chronic infections, we just don't have to keep our internal furnaces burning as hot just to maintain a baseline defense anymore.
The metabolic engine is idling at a lower RPM.
Which raises an incredible physiological question. If we continue to cool down as a species, century after century, will a quote-unquote dangerous fever for a human living in the 22nd century be a number that we currently consider just a totally normal, healthy body temperature today?
Wow, yeah.
Think about how our baselines are shifting the next time you go to adjust your own smart thermostat.